Welcome to Foundation. Today we are talking to a longtime friend and mentor of mine, Leo Laporte. Leo was a star at TechTV and is now the founder of This Week in Tech, which is pretty much the most popular technology show on the internet. Let's go chat with him. So Leo, I'm so glad to have you here. Like, we've been talking about doing this for a long time, but
I've had you on my shows.
Yeah, but I have never gotten into I of course, having worked with you, I've gotten into your background some, but I don't think we've ever gone really deep. So I want to start at the very beginning.
Now I'm nervous.
No, I mean, this is how I always start these off. I like to hear about your childhood. No, I'm serious. Where did you grow up?
My dad was a professor of geology. He's a paleontologist. He's retired now. And he was a graduate student at Columbia when I was born, so we lived in New York. Then a couple of years later, he got a job at Brown, so we moved to Providence. And mostly I grew up in Providence. Then in about 10th grade, in 7th and 8th and 9th grade, I went to an all-boys private school, a Quaker school called Moses Brown. And
Quaker school?
It was a Quaker school.
What kind of restrictions do you have with the Quaker school?
No, Quakers have no restrictions. They're very peaceful, loving, and almost hippie. And this was
right, but you can't take medicine and some of that stuff.
No,
right?
No. You got that's. I don't know who you're thinking.
Okay,
you can take medicine if you're a Quaker.
Okay, I didn't know.
Quakers are just Quaker Oats, the guy with the hat.
I love Quaker Oats.
Peaceful.
I love Quaker Oats.
They're peaceful, right?
Yeah.
And actually the Quaker service is very cool. There's really no minister. You just sit there, and if you have something you have to say, you stand up and you give a little talk, and then you sit down, and then the next person stands up. It's very egalitarian. It's great. And it was a great school, but I had to wear a necktie, in school, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, and there were no girls, which was good, because at that age, you get distracted. I wasn't distracted at all. And I remember, because this was 1968, that 67, 68, they thought, the world is changing, we got to loosen the restrictions, this necktie, jacket, and necktie thing. So they said, you can wear an ascot or a turtleneck.
Nice.
So, imagine, if you will, like a 13-year-old, 7th grader, and this is me. Oh, I don't have to wear a tie. I'm going to wear an ascot.
It's amazing.
That's good. I still know how to tie one.
Did you find yourself at that early age, did you have a technical mind at that point?
Not really. I mean, in fact, much like Bill Gates had at the school he went to, Lakeside School in Seattle, and he's roughly my age, the moms had a bake sale and bought a timeshare teletype that they put in a small room, and that's where Gates and Paul Allen got into computers. They would, about that age, they'd go in there and they'd, write little programs on the timeshare teletype.
Right.
We had one, but I thought, I don't want. You're in a little closet, boring. I was into chess though. That was my thing, and it turns out that actually is similar. It's very logical. You have to keep. Your concentration has to be up. You keep a lot of ideas in your head at once. You're thinking ahead, so you're in your mind. You're seeing the pieces move. So that actually was kind of this weird primitive training for that. But it wasn't until personal computers, much later. In fact, after college, that I got into computers.
Were you a personality at that point? Were you doing drama classes?
Yeah, I wanted to be an actor.
You did?
Yeah, I was in all the school plays and.
Starring roles, or?
Of course.
Really?
6th grade, I was Orlando Dubois, and As You Like It. I can still remember lines from those plays. Yeah, that's a Shakespeare play. And then in high school, I was in The Man Who Came to Dinner. I played Sheridan Whiteside. It was a guy in a wheelchair. The plot of it's a great play if you ever get a chance to read it. It's a comedy. The plot of the play is this very famous kind of Alexander Woolcott critic type breaks his leg in somebody's house and has to stay there for months, and he's incredibly annoying. So the play begins with me off stage going, "Great dribbling cow, you have the touch of a sex-starved cobra," and they roll me on. I'll never forget that. So that, yes, I guess personality, that's probably the right word.
That's amazing.
I was a drama kid, but at the same time a chess kid, so I was kind of nerdy.
Right.
My kids think I was pretty nerdy. Then, so in 9th grade, in between 9th and 10th grade, my dad said, I've got a job in California. Where I got a job at UC Santa Cruz. So, the difference going from a all-boys school where you have to wear a necktie or an ascot or a turtleneck in chilly New England to Santa Cruz in 1971, beach, boardwalk,
That must have been awesome.
No bras. Right. I didn't know. I was like shorts. It's 10th grade, and I'm going baha. I mean, it was really
How could you focus on technology at that point?
Wow. There was such a change. I mean, we would get up and go to the nude beach and make pancakes in the morning, watch the sunrise. It was just a complete shift, and I actually loved it. Notice I never left California.
Right.
New England is kind of uptight and a little stiff. I went back to college in New England, but this is where I like it.
So you were in high school then.
I went to Santa Cruz High.
You didn't have a job at this point?
I worked at McDonald's.
Okay,
yeah.
nice.
Yeah, I worked my way up from cashier to fry cook, the French fries. Eventually made the hamburgers. Finally, the peak of my experience at McDonald's. I worked there every summer for a couple of years, even in college.
Do you ever go back? Mickey D's?
Mickey D's?
Yeah.
We need to eat?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an addiction,
The fries is the only thing I ever...
You see this fat person? Ask Graham. I bet you he ate a few Big Macs in his time. He's nice and skinny now. You give up the Big Macs, everything changes.
Yeah.
They put so much sugar and corn in this stuff that you literally, I think, physically become addicted. I remember my manager, this is how bad it is, said, you can go on a break, but you got to eat these hamburgers if you're going to go on a break. And the reason is the managers get graded on how much waste there is. McDonald's doesn't throw anything out. If you make too many hamburgers, because you have to make them ahead of time, make too many hamburgers for the shift and you overestimated the rush and you've got leftover Big Macs, you have to throw them in this special waste container and they're counted at the end of the day. And it's a black mark against you. So he said, okay, Laporte, you can take a break, but you have to eat 6 Big Macs because I don't want to waste them. Because
that was like Super Size Me before there was Super Size Me.
I ate 6 Big Macs.
That's crazy.
Oh. But it was it was a good job because at McDonald's they teach you always be busy, always be doing something. And I learned a good work ethic. You really, if you don't have anything to do, wipe down the counters. You're always doing something. So it was a good place to learn a work ethic. I kept going back there. Finally, they said after the third summer, because I'd quit every fall to go back to college, and then I'd come back after the third summer. They said, you're not management material, are you? I said, well, no, I'm going to college. I'm going to Yale. I don't think I want to be a manager here. And they said, well, I don't think we're going to rehire you. And so that was the end of that career.
Yeah. You got to Yale.
Thing. Well, it was Yale or Hamburger U. It was a tough choice.
That's a tough choice. What would you pick in Yale as your major?
Chinese.
Chinese?
Yeah.
Okay, that's right.
Yeah. That's kind of that's always the first question anybody asks me. Why Chinese? And it was just because it was interesting. I don't know. What do you major in it? What I really majored in was, besides pot and acid, was the college radio station. And actually, that all kind of goes together.
Yeah.
And WYBC is actually one of the most famous and oldest college radio stations. And I worked there as a DJ, news guy, eventually became the station manager and the program director.
DJ, so you were setting the music playlist, you were like on air.
I played the music, It was freeform college radio.
Right.
It wasn't exactly, real radio. In
but
fact,
you knew
that was
at that
the problem.
point.
But I loved it. And so I wanted to be an actor, right? But I didn't want to be the guy who had to go to audition after audition and get no. I just really it didn't appeal to me. I didn't want to be a starving actor. Mm-hmm. But I did want to perform. So radio was a good choice because it's a job. It's still hard to get the job, but once you get it, it doesn't stop every few months and you have to get a new one. It's your job. So I just loved doing it.
Did you gain a following on campus? Like when did you?
No.
It was just a thing.
You just do it.
Yeah.
In fact, I think people hated me actually because one of the reasons I got into radio is I was working in the college dining hall serving food, and I'd do everybody get a different accent. I would do, oh, here's your bangers and mash. And I didn't know it because I'm young and dumb, but I think people thought, oh my God, this is the most annoying thing. And they said, you really should be doing that on the radio. And I thought they meant you should be on the radio. And what they really meant is you should just not be doing that.
Right.
Anybody, anywhere but here. So I went to the campus radio station, but I loved it. I dropped out of school actually to do it. I wanted to do it full time. And it was a paying job, station manager. So I did that for a year.
Did you ever go back to school then?
No.
Really?
No, halfway through my junior year, I just stopped going to school.
Okay.
Because I loved what I was doing, and I didn't really think the Chinese thing was going to work out.
Right.
I didn't know. It was State Department or teach, right? What else are you going to do? Yeah. And China wasn't open really at that time. Nixon has just started opening it. So it wasn't. It didn't look like a good career choice at the time. Now it looks like a very good career choice, knowing Chinese.
What was your calling to computers? Like, what was the thing that said, I'm going to make the jump now?
That was much later. So even at the time, personal computers started coming out. My cohort at the radio station, the general manager, Eric Schwartz, who later went on to a career, he started Mountain Computing, and he was actually made a living in early days of computing. But he was kind of a nerd, and he was building a radio station in his dorm. A computer in his dorm room, and we all mocked him for that. It was probably an MSI or an Altair, one of the early kit computers. And I wish I had that story, that Bill Gates story, where he goes, "We got to get into this," and he jumps and drops out of Harvard. But at the same time that he's going, "We got to get into this. Come on, Paul, let's start a company." I'm going, "Yeah, no, I'm going to keep doing radio.
Right.
That's the future." Maybe a mistake. I didn't get into computers until much later. I was an adult and working in a radio station in San Jose, and there was a Chuck E. Cheese nearby. And after my air shift, I'd go to the Chuck E. Cheese and drop quarters in the game machines. The first game I played was actually back in New Haven, was Pong, the original Pong.
So what year was this?
Would have been 74, maybe 75. And it was in a bar. It was a table Pong, and I was drinking White Russians, and I spent the whole day drinking White Russians and going, boop, boop, boop. So I liked video games right from the beginning. I thought, this is great. Battlezone was my game at the Chuck E. Cheese. I loved Battlezone, and I dropped a lot of quarters. Pretty soon I figured out, for the amount of money I'm paying to play this, I should get a game machine. So I got an Atari 2600, the first, really popular game machine. Then I got an Atari 400, which was their little Apple clone computer. But
just to play video games, or were you starting to dabble?
Then I started to dabble. You know how this starts.
Yeah.
Started to get Compute Magazine, typing in programs, but it had a membrane keyboard, so I stepped up from there to the Atari 800, which had a real keyboard. Then I got the special disk drive that lets you copy disks.
You're a geek at this point.
So at this point, it's gone.
Right.
I got a modem. My friend who worked at Atari had a CompuServe account, so I started playing the original Dungeon game, Crowther and Wood's Dungeon. On CompuServe for hours at a time. This is the kind of modem where you dial the number on the phone, and you hear, and then you put it in the cups.
Oh, interesting. Was this like a 300 baud or something?
Yeah, 300 baud.
Yeah.
And so the text is going,
right. Remember those days?
You are at the end of a road. And played that for, literally hours a day.
Though, right? It was like really
awesome.
Yeah.
So I really fell into it, so much so that expense started to build up, so I started writing articles for Atari magazines.
So were you still doing on-air radio?
I never stopped doing radio. I'm still doing it today.
Yeah.
But the computers was a parallel thing. It wasn't originally a profession. It was more a hobby, but I was supporting the hobby by writing. And I ended up writing for Byte and InfoWorld and,
How did you get those gigs? Like, how do you go?
It was easy in those days because... You
call them, I guess. You called them.
You sent them a sample and said, nobody's writing for Atari magazine, so that was easy. That's a good question, but it wasn't like hard.
Right.
And in '84, when the Mac came out, I remember when the Lisa, the year before it come out, and I would stand in the window of the Byte shop and just stare at it. It was $10,000.
Yeah.
And just drool. I had talked my boss into getting a CPM machine. And I really learned how to program on that. It was a North Star Advantage, and it had a pretty good BASIC in it, and then DBase too. So I started writing programs for the radio station, kind of managing the music playlists in DBase 2 and BASIC. And that taught me a lot. In fact, I
probably the only radio station in the world that had something that sophisticated, right?
I thought, this is great, because the guy, he was a great old guy, Bill Weaver, and he would look at all the charts to decide what the next song to add to the rotation was. And so I made this program that would show him bar graphs, listener opinions, all on one screen, a dashboard. He had no interest. It was but it was great for me.
Yeah.
I even talked him into buying a hard drive, which was thousands of dollars for, get this, 5 megabytes.
Amazing.
And I got him to buy me a C compiler, which was also thousands of dollars.
Like Borland or something? Or?
No, way before Borland. It was Whitehead C. I think Whitehead C.
That's a horrible name.
Was a horrible C, because all you got was this little stub of a compiler, and then you had to compile everything. You had to build all the libraries yourself, build everything, and you only had 5 megabytes.
Right.
I don't know how much I wrote, but I taught myself C. In fact, I still somewhere have the Kernighan and Ritchie I used to teach myself C. I loved it. So by then I'm hooked. I stopped playing chess. I'm hooked.
Did you ever think, I'm going to give up the kind of radio side, just become a full-time software engineer?
No, that's funny. I don't know why. I think I probably even then thought, to be a software engineer.
You could have joined Apple at that point.
Work for Apple. I knew people at Atari and Apple. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to sit in a cubicle and just be typing all the time. I'm a performer. When I later, about when I hit 30, I thought, this radio thing, this is stupid. There's no future. This is for dummies. And so I did take a job with a startup. A guy came to me, and his name was Bill Woodward, and the company was called Paracomp, and they were going to do, the Mac had come out fairly recently, 2 years earlier, and they were going to do parallel computing for scientific software, Paracomp. And I was the third employee. I was, vice president marketing or whatever. But I only did it for about 6 months. I said, I can't do that. I was doing stand-up in the cubicle. I needed to perform. That company later became Macromedia, and I probably should have stayed there. But
you'd be a billionaire by now.
I don't know. I think
Macromedia did quite well.
I think they did all right.
Adobe.
They do Adobe. I think they did all right. But anyway, whatever. I wasn't cut out to do that, and really, I have no regrets about it. It's interesting your career, because you did get into it, starting by covering it, but then you eventually said, "No, I want to do it." For me, while I've watched a lot of people, a lot of friends become very rich and successful, in startups, I didn't want to pick one thing. I wanted to cover it.
You kind of have, though. Like you're a
well, now we're a little bit of a startup, but
your own startup.
But it's a media startup.
Sure.
And what I really like with technology is to use it all and to cover it all and to talk about it all. I wouldn't want to pick one thing. And I'm fascinated by the people in it. So I have ringside seats at the revolution. So that's really what excited me. That didn't start happening. So I'm doing, writing computer articles, mostly just to support my habit, $50 here or a piece of software you get to keep.
Right.
Still doing radio. They didn't merge until the early 90s. I'm doing talk radio by this time. And I had interviewed a guy named John C. Dvorak, who was a very well-known computer columnist, still is. And
was he writing for Byte at the time, or
he was
PC World?
InfoWorld.
InfoWorld, okay.
And
because he became PC Magazine, he was
PC Magazine later. He did Inside Track, but this was 91, or 90. So it really was the height of the PC revolution, right? It was Windows 3.
This is a really interesting time. 3.1.
Well, when 3.1 came out, it was a revolution. It was like 3 was kind of crappy, and I remember looking at 3.1, or maybe it was even 3.11. And thinking, oh, wow, something's happened. This is now transformed computing from the command line. I like the command line. I didn't want to abandon the command line.
I didn't either.
I still use terminal all the time on my Mac.
I remember when I set my AutoExec file to launch Windows by default, and I was just like,
I've given in.
I've given in. I left DOS.
No, I love the command line, still do. And anybody who likes to program likes to type. And I loved programming, but it was a hobby. It was fun. And I wrote shareware. In fact, I wrote the programs I wrote, and this was long before open source even existed. I did give everybody this source code, whether it was assembler or C. It wasn't any concept of open source. I just felt like I made everything public domain, and if you want to fix the software or change it or whatever, here's the source code. So I had a Mac BBS in like 85 or 86 called Mac Q, because you had to queue up to get in because there was only one line.
Right.
Eventually got 2 lines, and that was living large. 2 U.S. robotic courier modems.
Those were expensive.
Ooh, baby, I really pumped some money into that thing.
Those were the best modems by far.
Oh, the best.
U.S. robotics.
How old were you at that time? 5?
No, I was in high school, in the early 90s. I was in high school.
Early 90s,
so I had my modems.
This was a few years before that.
Yeah.
But, it was probably 86, 87, because the Mac was out, but it was early days. It was so hard to get in, I said, well, I'm going to write a daemon dialer so that I can give this to my users and they will just dial. So I pretty much believe in 85 or 86 wrote the first multitasking program on the Mac.
Wow.
Because
crazy.
It turned out that there was this thing called the vertical blank interval. There's a very short period of time on cathode ray tube computers. It draws the screen and then repositions and draws again. In that repositioning time, nothing's happening. The computer's available. And so that's called the vertical blank interval. So you can, in the vertical blank interview, do small bits of computing, especially if you're in assembly language, you can get some stuff done. So the daemon dialer was the first program ever on the Mac to run in the background. So you'd be working along, and I mean, this is the Mac Classic. This is 68,000, very early. You'd be writing along. this demon dialer would just be waiting for the vertical blank interval, and then would do one little thing. Mainly what it was doing was just stuffing the serial port register with the AT-DT 415, whatever the phone number was, to dial it out.
Yeah.
And then once it was completed, at the next vertical blank interval, it would send it to the modem, and the modem would dial. And then the modem would send back, you probably remember, when it gets a ring, it would send an AT something back.
Right.
So now you watch during the vertical blank, and when you get it back, you either get it or not. And if you got a ring, if you got through, and you got the bong, bong, the Mac would go bam, bam, bam. So you could have that running and go make a cup of coffee or have lunch. And your Mac really, it was quite loud and annoying, would make this very loud and annoying sound. It was a demon dialer called a Q dial. And I wrote the first, before there was Zip, there was a program called ARC, which was a compression program.
ARC, yeah.
And
then PKWare came along.
Yeah. PK Zip changed everything.
Yeah.
Phil Kaplan changed everything. But ARC was the thing before then, and there was no ARC for the Mac. So I wrote the first ARC for the Mac. And the first thing I wrote was a decompressor, because it was much more complicated to compress it, but I wanted to decompress files that I downloaded.
Software
so
downloading.
I wrote a Mac ARC was another program I wrote, and gave away this. But that was fun. It was never a business for me. It was just a hobby.
Would you ever do that on the side? Like, I mean, today
I
I'm sure.
love programming. I love it, but I can't do it now. I'm too old.
But you could go hire a couple developers. You have the network. Like, you could build software apps or things that.
After Simpsons tapped out, we thought we should do TWiT tapped out. Because I was really hooked. That's a horrible game. Don't ever play it.
Yeah.
But I thought we could have the brick house. We could have all the characters.
Yeah, absolutely.
And those guys make a lot of money in donuts, right?
Yeah.
I know, because I spent $400 at donuts. It's the most expensive game I ever played.
You don't want to know what I've done on Clash of Clans. It's not
Me too,
pretty.
Clash of Clans. But you know, I decided not to buy gems.
Oh, gosh.
I bought $20 worth of gems just to say thank you for a great game. And now, but you know what? It's way slow if you don't buy gems.
There's a lot of downtime, yeah.
I've had Town Hall 7 for like a year. Don't get me started. Anyway, I love that. And I always thought when I retire, I'll program. You know, back here, there's books in every programming language. I collect them. I learned Forth. I loved C. I loved Pascal. You had to write in Pascal for the Mac if you weren't writing in 68,000 assembler at the time. So I've always collected languages. I love languages. Been playing with, and then I found Lisp, and I'm just a huge Lisp fan. And I find it really interesting to think of programming as not. I think a lot of times, especially professionals and guys who are trying to get something done, think of it as, well, I'm talking to the machine. I'm telling the machine what to do. And there's another way of thinking. It comes from the Lisp era. That what programming really is and a programming language really is a way to state an algorithm, to state a problem and state a solution that's kind of abstract and independent of the computer. And that instructing the computer is not what you're really up to. What you are is you're up to expressing a problem in a formal syntax and then solving the problem in a formal syntax.
In an elegant way.
Elegant way. And it's really, when you start thinking of it that way, it's poetry.
Yeah.
It's so great.
A lot of developers consider it like poetry. It's like
art.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's also a lot of typing.
Right.
And I'm kind of bored
And
with that.
if you don't do it full time, for me at least, I come back, you forget all the syntax, and you come back a couple months later and you're like,
Randall Schwartz told me that. You know, he's our guy who hosts our open source program, Floss Weekly, and he also wrote the book, Learning Perl, and he's a Perl guru. And he said, if you don't use Perl for an hour or two every day, forget it.
Yeah.
Because then you have to come back and almost relearn it.
Yeah.
The next day. So you're right. It's not. Someday, but the problem is then the brain goes, and one of the skills that you really need, I believe, is the ability to abstractly in the mind hold all these different. This is what you do with chess too. All these different things at the same time, and keep these threads in your mind. And I notice as I get older that gets harder and harder to do. You drop a thread or two, and that's not going to work so well.
So when did you have your first child? What age?
35, I think.
And so were you doing radio then?
Yeah.
Or were you...
Yeah, Abby was born in 92. And I was already starting to make this transition. You know, Dvorak and I had been doing occasional interviews. Rush Limbaugh came along at that time. I was a midday guy at KNBR in San Francisco, and they called me in and said, you know, there's this new guy. He's coming on the scene. We really think he's great. And it's syndicated. We're going to pick it up, and we're going to cancel your show. I'm sorry. And I said, oh, crap. I remember I chopped a cord of wood that night. But they said, but we're not going to fire you because we love you, but what we want you to do is do weekend shows. cars, home improvement, food and wine. I wouldn't be the expert. I'd be the announcer, and then we had Anthony Dias-Blue on wine and the Carey brothers on home improvement and like that. And I said, okay, but can I have a computer show? He said, nobody wants a computer show.
Yeah.
I said, this guy Dvorak and I, just give me 2 hours a weekend.
Yeah.
And they said, all right, because I was literally doing 9-hour shifts.
What time did they put you on with the computer show?
I don't remember.
It wasn't prime time, though. I would imagine there were
It was
really...
weekend, but it was
weekend,
like probably
okay.
Saturday afternoon, 2 to 3, something like that. John and I did it, and I loved it. And John, I owe him so much because he, I'm the announcer guy. I'm a caller number 3, Joe from Fresno. What's your question? And John was supposed to be the computer guy, but I think he very quickly realized, oh no, Leo actually is into this stuff. And John's fundamentally lazy, so he would start letting me answer the questions, which gave me huge credibility because here's really the guy.
And what year was this?
92.
Okay.
Or 91 maybe, just right around when Abby was born. Actually, yeah, here's the guy. And he's saying, Leo knows this. So that put me on the map. I've been writing and stuff, but that really put me on the map. So I owe John, because then we syndicated the show. We kept doing it. Yeah.
How hard was that to balance with having a new child and also working?
Well,
it must have been...
Actually worked out well because I only worked, I think, 3 days a week for the first year or two of Abby's life. So I took her to Gymboree and I took her to the mommies groups. I was like the only dad of the moms groups and stuff
That's amazing.
like that. It's good if you can do that.
Yeah, I'll be there at some point.
You should do that.
Yeah.
It's great. It was really fun. And then we were still living in San Francisco, which is about a year and a half to, we decided to move to Petaluma.
So this was when the internet was just, it was catching fire, right? The late 90s?
Late 90s, but this is early 90s.
Okay, early 90s.
I knew about the internet. I was using something called the Well, the whole electronic link, which Stuart Brand had created. And it was a bulletin board.
Sure,
but
the biggest.
It
right?
was wonderful, and there were great people on it, but until it fell apart, as all online communities seem to do. But there was a command you could issue in the Well, and you drop out of the Well into Unix. And once you were in Unix, you could use Archie, you could use Gopher. So before there was browsing, there was Lynx, which was the text-only browser. But it was really mostly Archie and Gopher, which were kind of menu-based ways to get files to walk around on the internet. It was all text-based. But I vividly remember doing that and thinking, oh my God, the world is here. And this is a small fraction of the number of people who are on the internet now.
Right.
Instead of a couple of billion, it was probably a couple of thousand. But I was blown away. And so I was aware of it. But when Dvorak and I started doing the show, what we ended up doing a lot of, at the time, Windows did not have a TCP stack. So it had no way to get on the internet.
Right.
So if you wanted to get on the internet, besides getting a modem, because there was no high-speed internet, you also had to modify Windows. You had to get WinStack. Do you remember this?
I don't know.
O'Reilly sold the internet in a box.
I know internet in a box. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, was that Mosaic? What it was bundled with?
It was either it was Mosaic. It was Mosaic. It wasn't Netscape yet.
It was a brown box. It said internet in a box.
In a box. But it was a WinStack, which was a TCP stack, because you had to modify Windows to even have it be on the internet.
Right.
And a browser. God, I remember the first time I saw an animated GIF. It was a compass, probably in Mosaic, that was moving, and it blew me away. I was like, whoa! Because I had gone from Lynx, which was a text browser, to, now I'm seeing pictures, to now I'm seeing motion.
Right.
Unbelievable. So we spent a lot of time on the radio show in the mid-90s teaching people how to get on the internet. There was a thing called, I think, TIP, the Internet Dialer or something, that would let you take a PPP account and turn it into a slip account, or a slip account and turn it into a PPP. You had to do all these. It was not easy. And we spent John and I talked about that a lot. That was interrupt conflicts and getting on the internet. Those are the two topics. Yeah. Because it was Windows.
They were related. When you got a new modem, you had an interrupt conflict, and until the Win modems came out.
Most people were on Genie, AOL, MCI mail, that kind of thing. They didn't. The internet wasn't really. It just was starting to happen.
Right.
It was very exciting. And I really love doing it. So I've been doing that kind of programming. I'm still today. I do a weekend radio show, and that's what I talk about. I answer people's questions. There was a 6-year break during the TechTV days because I was doing 5 days a week on the Screensavers and Call for Help. So I quit the radio show for that period of time.
When was that first year that
98.
That was
May 11th, 1998.
So that was ZD TV.
ZDTV.
So what was it like to make the jump to television for the first time?
Well, I did that in the early 90s too.
Okay.
Because right when John and I started the syndicated radio show, a guy named Halsey Minor called me from New York. He was a hedge fund manager. And he and his partner, Shelby Bonney, who was also a money guy, had put together some money, and they said, we want to start a computer cable channel. You're the only guy in the country doing mainstream media computer programming. We need you. We want you to be our vice president of programming. I was the fourth employee. This was CNET. I was the fourth employee there. And he said, your first job, we're going to move out to California. But before we do, your first job is to figure out how much is it going to cost us to build a cable channel. So I did some due diligence, and I came back to him and I said, best guess, you're going to lose $50 million a year for 10 years. And then you might make money. Mm-hmm. And he said, $500 million? No. Yeah. All right, we're not going to do that. So he pivoted. John and I and a few other computer journalists at the time, Gina Smith, Stuart Alsop, Fred Davis, did a roundtable show as their first pilot. It was terrible, but it really was the prototype for TWiT. Mm-hmm. And I based it on the McLaughlin Group, which was a political roundtable show I loved on PBS. And so,
where did this air? Did this ever... It never went out.
Thank God.
So what was your first on-air experience, like television hosting?
Halsey, at some point, and this is how Halsey was, very hot and cold, just dropped off the face of the earth. I wasn't fired, I just never heard from him. And it turned out he'd hired somebody, an LA guy. They did a pivot. They wanted to do web and TV to promote the web. Anyway, I was out. 6 months later, he calls me, says, come see our new headquarters in San Francisco. They were over by the Bay Club on the waterfront. He was in an old caboose, was his office. And it was my farewell he didn't even then, he didn't really fire me. But he said, I see Ziff Davis is going to do some TV. Maybe you ought to call them. And I got the message. Mm-hmm. It was like, we're done. So I called him. And Ziff Davis hired me. I flew out to New York, talked to Bill McCrone, who was the editor-in-chief of PC Magazine at the time. And they hired me to help them launch a TV show, which we did with Jim Latterback and Gina Smith. It's called The Personal Computer Show. They bought airtime on CNBC. We shot that at Apple TV in Cupertino. That was 93, I think.
Wow.
94.
What was it like going up in front of the camera for the first time, knowing that this is going to go out to television?
Well, it didn't bother me. I remember I'd been doing radio for years.
And radio, and so nerves were never an issue for you at all?
They were in the early days of radio, but by the time I'm doing TV, by the time I've been in radio almost 20 years, it was like, it wasn't a big deal.
Yeah.
And in fact, I was kind of behind the scenes. Jim and Gina were hosting the show. Jim did a few episodes, and they said, Jim, we're going to switch you and Leo. And I think Jim, for a long time, really held that against me. But Jim, honest, I did not lobby for that. Yeah. But they swapped us and put me in the camera. And we had fun on it. We only did about 13 episodes. They canceled the show. They weren't making any money on it. In fact, Ziff Davis continued to pay me a lot of money for me at the time. So also, again, I had a kid, but I was spending time with her because they paid me a lot of money to do nothing. It was
That's
literally
if you can get it.
To do nothing. One of my jobs was to fly down with Gina once a week to Hollywood because MGM and Ziff Davis were talking about doing some computer television. But my boss at Ziff Davis said, we don't really want to do this, but just pretend. So I'd go down and do crossword puzzles. We'd drive around. Gina and I wrote a book during that time.
Crazy.
But I did get a call. It was Christmas. It was like Christmas Eve, I want to say 93 or 94. They said, Microsoft and NBC are starting a channel. And they think they need a computer program on the channel. They've come to us. We need to pitch them. You've got 2 weeks to write a pitch. So early 1994, I guess it was, Bill McCrone and I and a bunch of people from Ziff Davis went to 30 Rock and pitched NBC on a show which became The Site, which was, my original pitch was TWiT. It was a bunch of people in a Victorian working on a website, and then you'd see the TV show at the end of the day, but there'd be cameras everywhere in the thing, and you could watch the people work, listen to the music they were listening to. It was kind of Big Brother before there was a Big Brother.
Right.
NBC loved the pitch, but they didn't end up, the show changed. In fact, I was promised to be chief correspondent of the show, like the reporter. And an NBC vice president came to me after the show, we started working on the show and said, NBC doesn't want you on the air. And he said to me, this guy is David Borman, who ended up being a Washington bureau chief for CNN. He's the guy who did the 3D Jessica Yellen thing on the CNN election night. He's a great guy. He lives up here now. But he said, to be honest, the word they used was ew. So Leo,
it's too
ew.
Geeky? Like
No, I think they really
technical?
didn't like how I looked. Remember, TV is very visual, and these executives, they don't listen with the sound on. They look at your hair.
Right.
So, but I was lucky. They made me technical managing editor, which meant I reviewed the scripts for technical accuracy. And they said, but wait, we've got something for you. You can be a virtual reality character. Because they didn't want to see me on camera, but they didn't mind me being a virtual reality character. So I did this thing called Dev Null. I'd wear this suit.
I remember this.
And Soledad O'Brien would sit at a coffee bar, look at a green dot, and then I'd be projected in real time.
Right.
Projected in, talking to her, and my hair would spin. And actually, the guy who spins my hair works for me now.
That's
He's a producer,
amazing.
Karsten Bondi. And I won an Emmy, which was my revenge for all of that. They canceled. Princess Diana died, and MSNBC, the network at the time, went to all coverage, all Diana all the time, put us on hiatus, and they realized the ratings were great, and we never came back. So the site was over, but Ziff Davis said, you know what we should do? We should do a cable channel. And it was not given that I would be on that channel. I kept waiting for the call. Eventually they said, well, let's talk. Maybe you want to do something. They knew I did the call-in radio show. I was still doing that. And they said, could you kind of do something like that on this new channel? Mm-hmm. And I said, yeah. They said, how many hours could you do? Because basically, they're trying to fill it with cheap stuff. They had some expensive shows. Remember Internet Tonight? Mm-hmm. They thought that is going to be the hit.
Who was the host again?
That was Scott Harriet and Michaela
Scott
Pereira.
Was great.
And that was heavily written, scripted. Mm-hmm. He's a comic.
He's a comic, yeah,
She's
really
a
funny.
TV star. I mean, she's on CNN now. Mm-hmm. Or yeah.
No, LA's
No. She moved to the big.
Really?
She's national.
Awesome.
Yeah. And so really good stuff, and real writers and real producers. Ryan Vance, I think, worked on it. And it turned out that the geeks liked the call-in show, the cheap throwaway call-in show better. In fact, they liked it so much, they said, can you do 2 hours? I said, well, we could do 2 shows. And they said, okay, we'll do 2 shows. Remember I changed, I'd be like Mr. Rogers on Call for Help with a sweater vest.
Go change.
And then I changed,
How
like
did you
fooled
do that
somebody.
every day? That had to be so difficult.
Well, I do more hours today now.
Yes, I guess that's true.
I was doing 2 hours a day. It was fun. We had a lot of producers and great people like you who helped put the show together. Really, all I had to do was just kind of show up and tell jokes and talk about stuff.
Still
Call for Help was answering calls mostly. And that's what I do on the radio.
Yeah.
So, and remember, they ran Call for Help on the screensavers like 3 times. So I was 6 hours of the 24 hours in the network. Yeah. But people wanted, the more geeky stuff we did, the more they liked it. Television still doesn't get this. They really think, no, it's got to look like it's soft and TV. And really what people want, and I think we've learned that here, is they want the most geeky stuff possible.
Right.
That's where you get the audience going, yeah, I want more of that. And so even from day one, TechTV, I don't think understood that, but the numbers didn't lie, and they weren't getting great numbers at all, but the only thing that really was getting numbers was a screensaver.
Right.
Call for Help. So I did that for 6 years, and they sold it. You took over the screensavers, moved to LA.
I was only there for a year.
Didn't do it for very long.
Yeah.
And I started TWiT, and you started doing that. In fact, I remember when you said, yeah, I'm going to leave G4, and I high-fived you.
Yeah.
Because Dig was taking off.
That's
you had been doing Dig all along.
Well, that I just didn't, it was so dumbed down, the content by that point, that it was just like, it wasn't really, I didn't join to be a personality. I joined because I was a geek, and I loved the content just like anybody else.
Yeah. You were doing The Broken, you were doing System.
Yeah.
You were doing hardcore tech, and you
right.
knew that's what people wanted. But the networks never, and they, you know what, knock on wood, they'll never figure that out, because that's why we exist. Right. Because the networks think it's foreign language programming. They don't understand it, and they think America doesn't want it. And they're right. Probably 80% of America, although that number I think is shrinking, doesn't. But more and more people are interested. More people, it's changed. We talk about smartphones a lot more than, interrupt requests.
Right.
But the fundamental premise of, you're smart, you're an intelligent person. Here, let me tell you as an intelligent person how this works, what it's doing, and what you can do with it. That hasn't changed.
So talk to me about becoming an entrepreneur, though, because this is the first time that it seems like every other thing that you've done in your career has been associated
I worked for
more or
somebody
less
every
with
day.
working
I was
with somebody
an employee.
else.
Yeah.
And so this was the first time where you're like, I'm going to get office building.
Well,
I'm going to.
It happened
difficult
organically.
transition?
No, because it didn't happen all at once.
Right. You had the little space.
Yeah, you did a system, and people can go back and look at that system up in the attic. It was just me and a mixer.
Was that exciting though for you? I mean, it was the first.
So what happened was I did go to, after TechTV went away, you went to LA, I went to Toronto because we kept doing it in Canada for a few years, 4 years.
That was a lot of flying for you, right? Back and forth.
Yeah, I was there a week every month. We did 15 shows in 4 days. It was kind of grueling, but it was a living. And I was back doing the radio show. This is 2004 now. I'm back doing the radio show, which I still do to this day, 10 years later. After about 4 years, I stopped going to Canada, and now I have a lot. But even when I'm going to Canada, I really have a lot of free time because 5 days a month I'm in Canada. The weekends I'm on the radio show. I have 15 days a month I'm not doing anything. Foolish me, I should have just enjoyed it. But what I ended up doing was basically starting TWiT. But it started as a hobby. You remember, you were there at the first episode.
Right.
We're at the 21st Amendment Brewery. It was after a Macworld Expo. It was all my buddies from TechTV, from the Screensavers. You, Patrick's wife, David Prager.
Yeah.
We're sitting around BSing, and I have, because I'm a radio guy, a recorder. I'm probably recording radio spots at Macworld. And so we recorded it. The first TWiT was 21 minutes. And it was called Revenge of the Screensavers. But like 50,000 people downloaded it. And that's when I said, oh, there's an audience still for what we did on TechTV. And we knew that. Everywhere you go today, still, right?
Yeah, people stop and say, I love the Screensavers.
Every day I get somebody today who said, I became a geek because of you. Every day. And that was going on then. So we knew there was an audience. So I called it the Revenge of the Screensavers, which G4 sent me a note saying, you better not do that. And so we looked around for a name, and it came to me in the shower, This Week in Tech, and we can call ourselves TWiT, which is nice and fun and self-deprecating.
Right.
And to this day, I still get people say, you know that TWiT is not a nice...
Right.
Yes, I do. And the audience immediately took to it. I mean, in the beginning, I was using BitTorrent to distribute it. I asked people to seed it.
Right.
I mean, it was just in my spare time. And I was the one doing all the editing. In fact, for years, I was the one doing all the editing. What really happened was, I'm just lazy. And I said, someday I dream of sitting down doing a show, because I added shows at Security Now, and Amber did Inside the Net. And so we were adding more and more shows. And I'm editing them all. Someday I dream of finishing a show and walking away. And then it will just appear.
Right.
And basically, that's what this is. We finally hired editors. We got a better studio. Video is what made this happen, because I felt like we needed to do video because that's what attracts the eye, attracts attention. Still, most of our audience is audio. And then I believe in live because I think ultimately interactivity and live are the most exciting thing. That's we always did the Screensavers live.
Sure.
So I still wanted to do that. But this all just kind of... I know Foundation is supposed to be entrepreneurs, and I guess I'm a kind of accidental entrepreneur.
But the thing that I'm trying to get at is that you've been successful in pretty much everything that you've done. It seems like you've jumped around a bit.
It's a random walk.
What do you attribute that to? Like, what is it in your personality?
I'm lucky, for one thing. People like me, which I feel very grateful for. And it's really mostly based on the fact that people seem to like me. And then the most important thing from this point out is I do what I'm really interested in, what I want to do. And I've always called myself...
So it doesn't feel like work for you?
No, well, it is work. In fact, doing something like the site, I had a gut ache every time I went in there because it wasn't what I wanted to be doing. But I didn't quit. I kept doing it because I wanted to... that's the other thing. I never burned any bridges. I always did my best work. I never got resentful. I could have been very resentful because they promised me one thing and made me wear a weird suit instead. But I just kept doing it. I kept one foot in front of the other, and always with the goal of, and this is, I think, really important for TV or any kind of media personality or YouTube star or whatever, is what happens almost inevitably is they start thinking it's about them. And so what I've always really tried to do is remember that we have a mission. Our mission is to educate people, inform people about technology so they can use it to make their lives better, to have more fun, to make everything better for them. How to use technology, what's bad technology, what's good technology, and just kind of keep going forward with that. And so that's worked out pretty well. You know, I follow my passion and keep in mind the audience, not how my hair is, and that's worked pretty well.
What's the one of the things I always ask entrepreneurs that I have on the show and founders is, give me some of your life lessons. Like, what are 2 or 3 things that you've really screwed up in the past that if you were, you know, starting over fresh now from the beginning, you'd never do again, because it's like, you know, paths that you went down that were dead ends, or it could be anything from hiring practices.
For me to say, well, there's a lot of hiring practices. I could, you know, there's the nitty gritty, and this is what you, I'm sure, do in your day job, is you help people who are starting new businesses with the things that you've learned in running the business. And there's a lot of that. But so in that regard, the best thing I ever did was hiring somebody to run my business, because I'm not a business person. I really am terrible at it. But I was.
What pieces of it you just don't enjoy? Like,
I have no interest in it. Everything. Well, it started because I was doing the books.
That's
and
a
I'd
nightmare.
forget to pay people. It was hard. I'd forget to pay bills.
Tax paperwork.
It was, yeah. And my accountant said, "You're going to go to jail if you don't get a bookkeeper in there to fix these books and make them work." And I said, "Okay, give me some names." And he gave me 2 names. One of them was Lisa. She came in. We met her, and she had one of the things she had a bunch of accountants, bookkeepers who worked for her. But one of the things she did was take books that are just a wreck and put them in order. And basically, she's cut off all the previous years and said, starting from here, we're going to do it right, and just hope you don't get audited. And it wasn't that bad. It wasn't like we were doing anything illegal, but it was just like
a mess.
It was a mess. And so but now I don't handle ad sales. I don't want to handle ad sales. I want to keep a distance from that. But I also I don't have any interest in it. I don't handle hiring, I don't handle HR, all the things so really, like I said, what I did was create a company so I didn't have to do the stuff I didn't want to do, and I would do the stuff I wanted to do, but the value of that is I'm doing the stuff that's the most valuable to the company.
Sure. It's let you focus on what you do best.
Exactly. So I don't want to be doing the stuff that I'm not good at, because that doesn't make the company money. In fact, it probably loses the company money. I want to do the stuff I'm good at, which is the on-air stuff. So I'm very lucky because it worked out. So that was, but when you say regrets, I feel like it's such a random walk. You just don't know how you would have gotten to here if you'd gone any other path. It's a weird path, as you see, but that's the path. And I think life is like that. I don't know very many people who were able to say at a young age, I'm going to do this and do it, and it just kind of all went that way.
Sure.
It's pretty much unpredictable and a random path. You can't really control the circumstances of your life. You can only control what you do with it, how you react, how you respond, how you hold it. And I think that's the most important lesson for me was I'm out of control. What happens in life is out of control. That light could fall and kill me right now or injure me, so I don't control that, and it's stupid to try to control that. What I do control is what I do with what happens. And I try to keep a positive attitude, not always easy. I try to focus on what my core mission is, and that helps you more than anything else if you know what your mission is.
How do you relax it? I mean, you're such an on-air presence and personality.
Well, I turn off as soon as the cameras are off. I'm just kind of like,
What do you do? Do you just like relax at home, watch TV?
I spend a lot of time at the computer because I have to kind of constantly be looking at, you have to kind of always be prepping.
Yeah.
So I'm always reading tech news, always looking, trying software, doing stuff.
Yeah.
I actually, it helps that I like this stuff, right? So for me, recreation is playing with a computer, so that's not a problem.
Yeah.
I like to cook. I love to travel, as you know. So my vacations are often just traveling. That's a really good vacation. And I like photography, so I'll bring a camera in. But I like what I'm doing. I'm pretty lucky to be doing this.
Yeah, and if you've done it all independently, which is impressive.
Yeah, I'm really glad that we, with all due respect, didn't take VC money. I think you told me even, don't take investors if you can avoid it. We bootstrapped the whole thing. We had a bank loan to build this, but we've paid it off already, and it's very profitable. It's very successful. It's challenging because I want to just do the on-air stuff, and inevitably, even though I have other people, there's still the kind of manager, you can't ever get away from managing and running the place. And so, when you have to fire somebody, for instance, I think of the Game of Thrones when Ned Stark chops off the head at the very beginning, chops off the head of a poacher. He does it. He says, because look, if I'm going to condemn somebody to death, I'm going to chop their head off.
Right.
I think that's honorable. And so, but that's stuff like that I don't really like or want to do. I don't really want to run a business, and I have people to do the stuff, but you still have to run it. You still have to run it. And so there's stressors there's things I don't want to do. I want to just be the jolly on-air host and just do that. But if your choice is to do that for somebody and then they control you.
Sure.
And that's the reason I started this. I didn't want to be controlled. The networks had never done right by the content. Not by me, but by the content. They'd never done right by it. So I wanted to control it because I knew what to do. And so the price you pay for that, Patrick Norton, I told Patrick once, I don't want to work for the man. And he said, Leo, there's always a man. And he was right.
Right.
There's always, even when you're your own company, there's always the man. Somewhere there's the man.
Right.
So you can't really get out from under that. But that's life.
Where do you see this going 5 years, 10 years from now?
If you'd asked me that a few years ago, I would have given you what has been up to now the stock answer, which is I want to build like the CNBC of tech, 24/7 channel. I want to bring in hosts and make it more than just the Leo channel. I want to have a variety of content. I want to have, and I still want to do this, a place where if you're a geek, if you're a tech enthusiast, you know that you can go and get the stuff you want to know, that you need to know from people that you like. And so that really is what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, people that you trust. You say it in your slogan.
Netcasts you love from people you trust. But really the mission statement is to empower people by helping them understand technology and use it better. And I think that we could do that. Times have changed a little bit since I started this. It's only been 8 years, but
only. That's crazy how time flies.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. We've been around longer than TechTV was. But the problem now is that everybody has the ability to do what I had to work, in my career 30 years to do, which is go independent. I was able to build this to go independent, to be able to do my own thing. But if I'm going to grow it, it needs a lot of other people who are willing to work under my roof, and nobody wants to do that because why should they? They don't need to anymore. So, YouTube stars and all that has really kind of changed the landscape out from under me. So this vision I had of building, it's kind of old-fashioned. It was like an old-fashioned media entity. And I don't think that works anymore. Anybody who's good, like somebody like Marcus Brownlee, he doesn't need to work for me. He doesn't need to work for anybody, right? He's doing great, doing it himself. And so, and I think that's fabulous.
So like the personality is in control of their own destiny now,
right.
Pretty much.
So that means there's a scarcity for me of the kind of people I would need if I want to make this be more than just me. So, we're kind of grappling with that right now. I think, unfortunately, the way this has worked is that the revenue has come 80 or 90% from the stuff I do. And then I've taken about, 3/4, 80, 75 to 80% of that revenue and subsidized everything else, built the studio, subsidized the shows. And I had hoped that by now it would start coming back, and it's really not. I'm still 80% of the revenue. So I think the writing is probably on the wall that it doesn't make sense for me as I get older. I'm 57. To spend, I've invested more than $10 million in TWiT. And there's no exit. It's pretty clear now there's no exit. I can't sell it. I'm not going to.
Unless like a Yahoo or someone came around and said, we want more content.
Marissa,
yeah.
I'm available. No, they're not because
then they hire Pogue. They
don't need me.
Yeah, but you would be in a great addition to fill out their whole content
but then
side.
I would be working for Yahoo. I don't want to be,
that's right? That's a good point.
So, and the truth is I can continue to do what I'm doing and make, probably $2 or $3 million a year for the next 10 years. So one possibility is that that's what I'll do. And I'll just put that away. Because 10 years from now, is anybody going to want to hear what I have to say about technology? I'll be 67. People will probably say, that old man, he doesn't know what's going on.
I don't think that'll ever be the case.
I might be the avuncular, I don't know. Maybe there's a role, but I can't count on that. So I'm thinking I've got 10 years, more or less, maybe less, to provide for me in my old age and my family, you know, and so right now we're kind of struggling with this at TWiT. We don't really know what's going to happen at TWiT. So there's a couple of questions I would ask you, like, when is the company not a startup anymore? 8 years in, is it time?
It's not a startup, yeah.
It's not a startup, right? Is this a tech startup? No, it's a media startup. That's got different rules. You know, for a while we were doubling revenue every year. I mean, we had great growth, but that's slowed down. Now it's 25% a year. It's still, I mean, for a lifestyle business, it's great. Maybe a little more than a lifestyle business.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's better than a lifestyle business.
But it's not quite, I don't know what it is, right? It's a startup in tech, but it's a media start. It's it's an odd duck. And I don't know if there's a roadmap for this. You know, I had thought that IPTV is on its way. We will be on a parity with a CNBC. We'll be kind of like a CNBC. What I thought our roadmap was for this network probably doesn't make sense in the YouTube era. And so we
learned the same thing at Revision 3. I mean, this is why
you became a YouTube aggregator, basically.
It was we kind of threw our hands up and said, you know, we can't do all this original programming. It just doesn't make sense. These stars, they can go off and get paid handsome sums of money independently from us. So we have to kind of try and be their ad sales, and that's what
we looked at. But I looked at Revision 3, and you know, that's of course one option for us is to become a back end for stars.
It's really hard. There's so many of them that are out there, and then you're just another ad sales company. They don't really need us
because, and what the other thing that's changed is Patreon and things like it mean that people they don't need us. So I feel like almost what we're doing is almost old school media. It's very much like just traditional
It's crazy
TV.
how in 8 years I can
change
flip
like
that, yeah.
But that's fine with me. That's fine with me. It's just, you know, one of the reasons we built this is because I just wanted to hang out with people I loved doing Tech TV so much. I wanted to recreate that environment of a fun place to be with smart people that you loved being with. And so a lot of the money that I put into this is really mostly just paying people to be my friends.
Oh, don't make it sound that bad.
And, you know, so there you go.
I will take my check on the way out. I look forward to receiving my check.
I know that's a weird way to put it, but it kind of is like that. And it's been well worth it. I wanted to build something really cool. From a purely business point of view, it probably doesn't make sense. Does that happen though in the startup world? Doesn't it?
Absolutely. It happens every single day. I mean, there isn't a startup that I know that's you can count on your hands how many startups have lasted longer than 5 years, right? And then the ones that last beyond 10 years, I mean, Google, like there's only a few Microsoft.
We're not going to become Google size. That's obvious.
But it's just like technology changes so fast, you have to be willing to adapt to it.
Right.
And so that means scaling up, scaling down, somewhere in between. Like
I felt like we were making a bet. I really had aimed into the future, right? We were making a bet on IPTV. We were making a bet that people would be more interested in computers and technology. We made a bet that broadband would be everywhere. Our audience is more than a third international. So we made a bet that there'll be globalization. We've bet on all of those things. And I thought, well, that's pretty good. I've aimed pretty far in the future, but the train moves fast. And so I have to think about, well, okay, what's the next bet? But I don't have an infinite amount of time left. That's the real problem.
Yeah.
If I were your age, I would probably have more of a vision about the future. But I don't have, 20, 30 years to do this.
I think if IPTV hits in a serious way, Apple on an Apple type device in the television, you could be looking at, instantly another million people watching the show.
Right.
And that's when it gets
this could be $1 billion business if that takes off.
Right, exactly.
Easily.
But to your point, the question is when. Like that's a bet, but is that 2 years from now? Is that 10 years from now?
And meantime, I'm burning $5 million a year each and every year of my money. Out of there's no investor's money I'm burning. It's coming out of my pocket. That's money I could say, I'm going to keep that money, and in 5 years I'll have $25 million and I can retire.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting question.
So how do you dynamically scale down and scale up depending on what's going on in the ecosystem?
We're still running as a traditional media business. So we introduce new shows, keep the ones that stick, cancel the ones that don't. That's a pretty traditional thing. I have a very clear vision. I don't want to have too many shows. I want to have them fairly well targeted. I want people to know what they're going to get when they tune in TWiT. And so we have a fairly clear vision of all of that. And I think we refine that. Every time a show doesn't work, we learn more about what our audience wants. Every time a show works, we learn more. So I think we have a very good idea of what our audience, our community is telling us. Our community is growing, not 100% a year, maybe 10, 20% a year. One of our shows grew 30% last year. So it varies, but there's growth. It's not like we're going backwards.
Sure.
It's
got to play the long game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I mean, it's. I feel like a lot of these technologies are going to come online in the next few years that are really going
I'd hate to shut this thing down and then the next year, like IPTV takes off.
Exactly.
Because we really put in our dues. We've put in the time.
Yeah.
And we've built the community. We've built the studio, the infrastructure.
No one's built a community like this.
It's
no one.
It's wonderful.
It's insane.
So I'll probably keep doing this. I mean, truthfully, I'll probably keep doing it. Because I can't imagine not doing it. But I see that $5 million, $6 million, $7 million a year going out the door. And it's like, bye.
Yeah.
At least I have friends, sort of.
Yeah. Well, I got to say, no matter what you've touched, it's been successful. So that's been awesome to watch. And
I touched you.
That's right. You gave me my start, so I appreciate that. And no, honestly though, you've been an awesome mentor for me for many, many years, and someone I've always looked up to, and continue to put out amazing shows and content. So thank you for being on the show. This has been awesome. It's been great to hear the backstory, and I'm excited for the future because I do believe that this stuff is going to, like IPTV and some of these other things are going to kick off, and like that 30% year-over-year growth, which is awesome, is going to turn into several 100% or more. Like, there's no doubt. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to believe that too, right?
It might be the knitting channel, not the tech channel.
Right.
That's the only problem.
Yeah.
Kevin, you're the greatest.
Thank you, sir.
I have such affection for you, and I look up to you as a mentor. It's a mutual mentoring relationship.
Appreciate
I really
that.
admire what you've done. So
Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.